Nerath Prime did not have days. It only had shades of darkness. The capital city nocturne spire pierced the upper atmosphere like a shard of black obsidian, driving itself into the heart of a dying star. Here, the sky was a bruised tapestry of violet and charcoal, illuminated only by the bioluminescent veins of the city architecture and the twin moons that hung low and heavy, acting as eternal sentries. It was a world built for predators, for creatures who found comfort in the shadows and sustenance in the blood of the living. It was a world that had remained unchanged for thousands of years, until today. The grand hall of the spire was currently suffocating under the weight of history. The ceiling, vaulted and lost in gloom 300 feet above, was draped with banners of deep crimson and silver, the colors of the Nocturne Dominion. Below the floor was a sea of velvet-polished armor and skin as pale as marble. The air smelled of ozone-cold stone and the metallic tang of synthetic blood wine. Adrian Cole stood near the edge of the dais, feeling very much like a goldfish that had been dropped into a tank of hungry barracudas. He tugged at the collar of his ceremonial suit. It was a stiff, high-necked garment, woven from thermal-regulating silk, designed to keep a human warm in the perpetually frigid temperature of the vampire court. To Adrian, it felt like a noose. "Stop fidgeting," a voice murmured beside him. It was a sound like velvet dragging over crushed glass, smooth, dangerous, and impossibly cold. Adrian turned to look at his wife. Queen Alara Nyx was not merely beautiful. She was architectural. Her cheekbones looked sharp enough to cut diamond, and her skin possessed a luminosity that seemed to absorb the ambient light rather than reflect it. She wore a gown of midnight blue that seemed to flow like liquid smoke around her tall, lithe frame. Her eyes were the color of freezing mercury, ancient and unreadable. She was over 600 years old. Adrian was 32. "I am not fidgeting, my queen," Adrian replied, keeping his voice low, his tone laced with a deliberate dry humor. "I am simply checking to ensure my circulation has not decided to surrender to the climate. It is roughly 10 degrees here." "It is 12 degrees," Alara corrected her gaze, fixed on the crowd of nobles moving below them. "Perfectly comfortable." "For a corpse, perhaps," Adrian muttered, flashing a quick, disarming grin that did not quite reach his eyes. Alara did not smile. She did not look at him. She merely took a step closer, her presence radiating a subtle, terrifying power. To the thousands of guests watching them, it looked like a moment of intimacy between the newlyweds. To Adrian, it felt like standing next to a nuclear reactor that had not yet decided if it wanted to melt down. "They are watching Adrian," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "Do not give them reason to think you are weak. Stand straight." "I thought the whole point of this alliance was that—" "I am weak," Adrian countered, though he straightened his spine. "I am the fragile human representative, the olive branch from the Terran Confederacy. If I look too dangerous, your counts and dukes might get nervous." "They are not nervous of you," Alara said, her voice devoid of cruelty, stating it as a simple biological fact. "They are offended by you. They see you as a pet, a fleeting thing. Do not prove them right by shivering." Adrian looked out at the sea of faces. The marriage had been broadcast across 3 sectors. It was strictly political, a desperate bind between the expansive industrial might of humanity and the ancient territorial power of the vampires to hold off the encroaching void-born threats on the outer rim. But to the vampiric High Council, Adrian was an insult, a human husband for their eternal queen. It was blasphemy. A tall figure detached himself from the crowd and approached the dais. He moved with the liquid grace inherent to their species. It was Archduke Varen, a creature who had likely eaten people solely for sport in the centuries before the treaties. "Your Majesty," Varen bowed to Alara, a motion of fluid precision. Then he turned his pale eyes toward Adrian. The disdain was palpable, thick enough to taste. "And Consort Cole, I trust the gravity of Nereth Prime is not too taxing on your skeletal structure. We would hate for you to crumble before the reception ends." Alara stiffened imperceptibly. Adrian felt the shift in her energy, the protective instinct of an owner, guarding a prized, albeit useless possession. Before she could speak, Adrian stepped forward. He kept his hands relaxed, his posture open and non-threatening. "You are too kind to worry, Archduke. I have been taking my calcium supplements. Dr. Mira Solon assures me my bones will last at least another 40 years. After that, well, I suppose I will make a very tidy pile of dust for the janitorial drones." Varen blinked, caught off guard by the self-deprecation. He had expected fear, or perhaps foolish bravado. He did not know how to handle a human who treated his own mortality as a punchline. "Amusing," Varen said, his lip curling slightly. "Let us hope your wit lasts as long as your bones." "I wouldn't bet on it," Adrian replied cheerfully. "My wit usually runs out around 2 in the morning." Varen dismissed him with a sneer and turned back to the Queen. "My Lady Lord Kalar Thorn sends his regrets. He felt his presence might disturb the festivities, given his well-known stance on interspecies mingling." The air around Alara dropped another 5 degrees. "Lord Kalar is free to rot in his fortress," she said softly. "His absence is the greatest wedding gift he could have offered." As Varen retreated, Alara glanced at Adrian. "You talk too much." "I talk just enough to keep them from biting," Adrian said. He reached out his hand, hovering near hers. He did not touch her. He knew the protocol, but he leaned in. "They hate me, Alara. That is fine. Let them hate me. As long as they underestimate me, we are safe." Alara looked at him, then really looked at him. Her metallic eyes scanned his face, searching for something. She saw a man with messy brown hair, soft skin that bruised easily, and a heartbeat that fluttered like a trapped bird against the silence of her own chest. She saw fragility. She believed in the narrative of the Alliance she was the shield, and he was the glass vase behind it. "I will protect you," she said, a vow as solemn as stone. "You are under my care, Adrian. No harm will come to you within these walls." Adrian smiled, a sad, knowing quirk of his lips. "I know." He lied. He knew better than anyone that safety was an illusion. And he knew with a certainty that thrummed in his bone marrow that something was wrong with the room. It was a low frequency, a vibration that most humans could not hear, and most vampires would ignore as background noise from the Spire's massive energy reactors. But Adrian heard it. Or rather, he felt it. It was an itch at the base of his skull, a sensation of static electricity crawling up his spine. He scanned the room, his eyes moving lazily, deceptively slow. He was not looking at the guests. He was looking at the flow of the air, the way the light bent around certain objects. His gaze landed on a floating drone, serving tray, hovering about 20 feet away from Alara. It was a standard service droid carrying crystal flutes of crimson nectar. But the air around its propulsion unit was wrong. It was shimmering, distorting, as if heat was radiating from a cold engine. The hum in Adrian's head spiked to a scream. Target lock. Energy buildup. 3 seconds. He did not think. If he thought, he would hesitate. If he hesitated, Alara would take the full force of the blast. Her regenerative abilities were legendary, but an entropy charge, which was what the distortion suggested, would scramble her molecular structure before she could heal. Adrian turned, feigning a trip. He lunged toward Alara, his foot hooking clumsily on the hem of her long train. "Whoa!" he shouted, his voice cracking with a very convincing human panic. He crashed into her. It was an impactful, graceless collision. To the onlookers, it looked like the drunken human consort had lost his balance and tackled the Queen of the Night. He shoved her hard, his shoulder driving into her midsection, knocking her off the raised dais and down onto the velvet floor below. "Adrian!" she hissed, shock and rage flaring in her eyes as she hit the ground. 1 second later, the air where Alara had been standing ceased to exist. There was no fire. There was no shrapnel. There was only a sickening thwump sound, like the universe imploding in a localized pocket. A sphere of pure distortion, roughly 6 feet in diameter, bloomed in the space Alara had occupied. The stone of the dais instantly turned to dust. The banner behind the throne disintegrated into gray atoms. The shockwave that followed was invisible, but hit with the force of a freight train. Adrian, lying on top of Alara to shield her, grunted as the pressure wave slammed into his back. It felt like being kicked by a horse. He bit his tongue, tasting copper, but he didn't move. He kept her pinned, his head buried in the crook of her neck, his hand protectively over the back of her head. Silence fell over the grand hall. Total, absolute silence. Then, the screaming started. Assassin! Protect the Queen! The Royal Guard elite warriors clad in obsidian armor materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn. They formed a perimeter around the fallen couple in less than 2 seconds. Alara shoved Adrian off her. Her strength was immense. He flew back a few feet, skidding on the polished floor. She rose to her feet in a blur of motion, her eyes glowing a terrifying predatory red. Her fangs were extended, her face a mask of fury. "Secure the exits!" she roared, her voice echoing like thunder. "No one leaves!" Adrian sat up, rubbing his shoulder. He made a show of looking dazed, blinking rapidly. "Did I take a trip?" he stammered, looking at the crater in the dais where his wife had stood moments ago. "I think I tripped." Alara looked down at the crater, then at Adrian. The dust was still settling on his cheap human suit. He looked disheveled, pathetic, and confused. But something in her ancient mind clicked. She replayed the memory. Vampires had perfect recall. She rewound the last 10 seconds in her head. She saw the drone approach. She saw Adrian turn. He hadn't tripped. He had moved. He had moved before the distortion field activated. The blast radius was calculated perfectly to decapitate her. If he had stumbled 1 second later, they both would be dust. If he had stumbled 1 second earlier, the assassin might have aborted. His timing was not lucky. It was mathematical. She looked at him. Really, looked at him, her red eyes fading back to mercury. He was dusting off his lapel, looking up at her with wide, apologetic doe eyes. "I am so sorry, Alara," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I must have had too much champagne. I completely lost my footing." "You saved my life," she said, her voice flat, analyzing him. "I fell on you," Adrian corrected. "There is a difference. I imagine I bruised your dignity. Again, my apologies." Alara did not respond. She turned to the captain of the guard. "Sweep the room, find the source of that drone, and get us to the secure chambers, now." She grabbed Adrian by the arm. Her grip was iron. She hauled him to his feet, not gently. As she dragged him toward the emergency exit surrounded by a phalanx of guards, Adrian kept his head down. He let out a shaky breath, letting his heart rate remain elevated, letting the adrenaline flood his scent, so the vampires would smell his fear. He needed them to smell fear. If they smelled the cold, calculated focus that was currently operating in his brain, he would be dead before morning. The secure chambers of the Nocturne Spire were buried 2 miles beneath the surface. The walls were lined with lead and dampened with psionic suppression fields. It was the safest place on the planet. Adrian sat on a plush leather chair, holding a glass of water that he didn't drink. He watched Alara pace. She was a predator in a cage. She had stripped off her heavy ceremonial outer robe, revealing a sleek tactical bodysuit underneath. She was speaking rapidly into a comms device, barking orders to her generals. "It was a phased entropy charge," she said, ending the call, and turning to the 3 advisors standing in the room. "Only one faction has access to that level of tech." "The purists," said Valerius, her oldest advisor, a man with skin like parchment and eyes like black holes. "Lord Kaler Thorne." "He denies it, of course," Alara said, throwing the comms device onto a table. "He claims he was meditating in his fortress. But the message is clear. He strikes at the wedding to show that my alliance with humanity has made me vulnerable. She stopped pacing and turned to Adrian. Adrian shrank back into the chair slightly. I assume that Lord Kalar is the one who didn't send a gift? Alara walked over to him. She placed her hands on the arms of his chair, trapping him. She leaned down, her face inches from his. He could smell the ozone on her skin. Adrian, she said softly. Look at me. He met her gaze. How did you know? She asked. Know what? Do not lie to me. You moved before the detonation. You pushed me clear of the kill zone. A human reaction time is approximately 0.25 seconds for a visual stimulus. That charge was invisible. There was no auditory warning until the collapse. Yet you moved. Adrian swallowed hard. He had practiced this lie. He had practiced it for 5 years. I felt a static shock, he said, his voice wavering. From the carpet. It startled me. I turned to look and my heel caught on your train. It was an accident, Alara. I swear. I'm just clumsy. You've seen me trip over my own shadow 3 times this week. Alara searched his face. She looked for the micro-expressions of deceit. But Adrian was a master. He gave her nothing but confusion and residual shock. A static shock, she repeated, skeptical. Big one, Adrian nodded. The air felt tight, like before a thunderstorm back on Earth. Alara straightened up, pulling away. She seemed disappointed, though. Adrian couldn't tell if it was because she didn't believe him or because she did. The air felt tight, she mused. Entropy charges do displace atmospheric pressure before activation. It is extremely unlikely but possible that your primitive mammalian senses picked up on the pressure drop. Primitive is my middle name, Adrian said with a weak smile. Alara turned back to Valerius. Double the guard. I want a Class 4 security detail on the consort at all times. He is not to leave the residential wing without 3 armed escorts. He is not to open his own doors. He is not to eat anything that has not been scanned twice. Adrian sat up straighter. Wait. Hold on. Alara ignored him. If he goes to the bathroom, I want a guard outside the door. If he sleeps, I want a guard in the room. Alara, Adrian said louder this time. She turned to him, her eyebrows raised. Yes. I am your husband, Adrian said, standing up. I am not a prisoner. And I am not a porcelain doll. You are a human, Alara said, her voice dropping an octave. You are soft. You break. Today proved that. If you had been 1 foot to the left, you would be vapor right now. You survived by blind, dumb luck. I will not rely on luck to keep my political alliance intact. Is that all I am? Adrian asked, stepping closer to her. He felt the fear genuine this time, but it was fear of being caged, not fear of her. An alliance, a signature on a treaty. You are a symbol, Alara said coldly, and symbols must be preserved. I have a voice, Adrian argued. I have rights. You can't just lock me in a box. I can, Alara snapped, her eyes flashing red again. And I will. Because if you die, my empire falls into civil war. Lord Kalar wants you dead to prove that I cannot protect what is mine. I will not give him that satisfaction. What is yours? Adrian challenged. Is that it? I'm a possession. You are mortal, Alara shouted, the control finally cracking. You live for 80 years, maybe 90 if you are lucky. To me, that is a blink of an eye. You are fragile, Adrian. You bleed if you touch a sharp edge. You freeze if the temperature drops. You are constantly one mistake away from death. So yes, I will lock you in a box if it keeps you breathing. The room went silent. The advisors looked at the floor. Adrian looked at his wife. He saw the fear behind the anger. She wasn't just worried about politics. She was terrified of his fragility. It was almost touching in a twisted, condescending way. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He needed to de-escalate. He couldn't win a shouting match with a vampire queen. Fine, Adrian said quietly. Safety protocols, guards, food tasters, whatever you want. Alara stared at him, her chest heaving slightly. She smoothed her hair, regaining her composure. It is for the best. Just do me a favor, Adrian said, his voice tired. Don't pretend it's because you care about me. Just admit it's about the treaty. Alara opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. She turned away. Valerius, escort the consort to his quarters. Initiate the lockdown. She didn't look back as Adrian was led away. Adrian's quarters were lavish, decorated in dark velvet and silver, but they were unmistakably a cage. The windows were reinforced plasteel. The door was locked from the outside. He waited until the heavy footsteps of the guards outside faded down the hall. He waited another 10 minutes to ensure the room's surveillance cycle was on its predictable loop. He walked to the center of the room. It was pitch black, save for the dim light of the moons filtering through the window. Adrian Cole closed his eyes. He let the mask drop. The goofy, clumsy grin vanished. The slump in his shoulders disappeared. His posture shifted, becoming rigid, balanced, lethal. He let out a breath he felt he had been holding for 6 months. Weak, he whispered to the darkness. Fragile. He raised his right hand. He didn't move a muscle, but he focused his mind. He focused on the shadows in the corner of the room. Come. The darkness obeyed. It didn't just get darker. The shadows physically detached themselves from the walls. They slithered across the floor like living ink swirling around his boots. The air in the room dropped 20 degrees frost, forming intricate patterns on the velvet furniture. Adrian opened his eyes. They were not brown anymore. For a fleeting second, they were entirely black. No iris, no sclera, just the deep, endless void of deep space. He looked at a heavy silver candelabra on the table, a solid piece of metal, weighing at least 5 pounds. He didn't touch it. He just looked at it. The candelabra crumpled. It didn't bend. It imploded. It twisted in on itself as if a giant invisible hand had crushed it, like a soda can. The metal groaned and shrieked, compressing into a dense ball of scrap in less than 2 seconds. Adrian exhaled, and the shadows retreated. The room warmed up. His eyes returned to their warm, harmless brown. He walked over to the window and looked out at the sprawling, dark city of Nocturne Spire. Somewhere out there, Lord Kalar Thorn was plotting. Somewhere out there, an army was gathering. Alara thought she was locking a rabbit in a cage to keep it safe from the wolves. She didn't realize she had just locked a wolf in with the rabbits. 100% security, Adrian muttered to himself, mimicking Alara's tone. He looked at his own reflection in the glass. God, this is going to be a long marriage. He turned back to the bed, ready to play the role of the sleeping, defenseless human. But as he lay down, his mind drifted to the sensation of the explosion earlier. The energy. It was familiar. It wasn't just technology. The entropy charge had a signature. It felt like the old wars. It felt like the power he had buried deep inside himself after the incident on the colony of Sirius IV. If Kalar Thorn was playing with that kind of fire, then Adrian wouldn't be able to stay in his box for long. He pulled the silk sheets up to his chin. Outside, the eternal night continued indifferent to the monster hiding in plain sight within the Queen's own bedroom. Life at the Nocturne Spire had a rhythm to it, a slow, gothic cadence that felt less like living and more like haunting. For Adrian Cole, the past 3 weeks had been an exercise in aggressive boredom, interspersed with moments of acute humiliation. He had learned that being the husband of a 600-year-old vampire queen involved less ruling and more standing. He stood in receiving lines. He stood behind Alara's throne. He stood on balconies overlooking the obsidian cityscape, while dignitaries droned on about blood tithes and territorial disputes. To the vampiric aristocracy, Adrian was not a king consort. He was a novelty item. He was a pet that Alara had inexplicably decided to adopt, perhaps out of a bizarre mid-millennium crisis. Consort Cole, Lady Vespera, purred her voice like silk sliding over a tombstone. She was a high priestess of the blood moon, wearing robes woven from spider silk and shadow. "I hear the human lifespan is so tragically brief. Tell me, do you feel your cells decaying right now? It must be a fascinating sensation, like watching a flower wilt in fast motion." They were in the sapphire atrium, a cavernous hall made of blue glass, attending yet another diplomatic reception. Adrian held a cup of lukewarm herbal tea, the only thing on the menu that wasn't hemoglobin-based. Adrian took a sip, masking his irritation with a wide, vacuous smile. "Oh, absolutely, Lady Vespera. It is a thrill a minute. Every morning I wake up and check to see if my knees still work. It keeps life exciting. I imagine being immortal must be terribly dull. No deadlines. No urgency. I would probably spend the first 2 centuries just learning how to juggle." A few nearby nobles tittered behind their hands, though it was unclear if they were laughing with him or at him. Lady Vespera's eyes narrowed slightly. "Juggling. How quaint. We spend our centuries mastering the arcane arts and steering the fate of galaxies. And yet," Adrian countered, his tone light and breezy, "I noticed the throne room still has a draft in the north corner. You would think with all that arcane mastery, someone could fix the insulation." Alara, standing 3 feet away discussing trade routes with an ambassador from the Lyran star cluster, did not turn her head. However, Adrian saw the corner of her mouth twitch. It was a microscopic movement invisible to anyone who had not spent the last 20 nights studying her face, but it was there. She was amused. "Consort cold jests," Alara said, her voice cutting through the chatter like a glacial wind. She turned her mercury eyes sweeping over Lady Vespera. "But he has a point. The draft is annoying. See to it that the maintenance drones address it, Vespera. Unless, of course, your arcane arts are too busy for such mundane tasks." Lady Vespera paled, bowed stiffly, and retreated. Alara stepped closer to Adrian. To the room it looked like a queen checking on her subject. "You enjoy provoking them," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "It is the only entertainment I have," Adrian replied, keeping his smile plastered on. "Besides, if I don't make jokes, I might start screaming. And screaming is terribly rude at a cocktail party." "They are testing you," Alara said. "They want to see if you will snap. If you show anger, they will see it as weakness, a lack of control." "I know," Adrian said, his voice dropping, losing its playful edge for a split second. "I am not going to snap, Alara. I am the picture of human fragility. A little soft, a little stupid, and entirely harmless." Alara studied him. Her gaze was intense, stripping away his layers. Since the assassination attempt at the wedding, she had been watching him more closely. She sensed something in him, a density, a weight that did not match his carefree persona, but she could not name it. "Go to your quarters," she said suddenly. "You look tired. Humans need sleep every 16 hours, correct? Give or take." Adrian shrugged. "Are you dismissing me?" "I am preserving you," she corrected. "I have a war council meeting. It will be loud, violent, and boring. You would hate it." "Try me," Adrian challenged. "Go, Adrian." It was not a request. Adrian bowed theatrically. "Your wish is my command, my queen. I shall go recharge my fragile batteries." As he walked away, he felt her eyes on his back, heavy and protective, like a physical touch. He hated it. And terrifyingly, he was starting to like it. 2 miles beneath the spire, in a fortress of jagged iron and black stone that hung suspended over a magma vent, Lord Kalar Thorne watched a hologram of the reception. Kalar was old. Not just in years, but in essence. He was a pureblood from the first lineage, a warrior who remembered the taste of the atmosphere before the terraformers arrived. He was massive, his skin the color of gray ash, his hair a mane of white that flowed down his armored back. "Look at him!" Kalar spat, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated the metal floor. "A jester. A monkey in silk." He waved his hand, and the hologram of Adrian Cole dissipated into pixels. Standing before him were 5 figures. They were clad in armor, that seemed to absorb light, their faces, hidden behind masks of smooth, featureless obsidian. These were the obsidian fangs. They were not soldiers. They were surgeons of violence. They belonged to no clan, answered to no general. They were Kalar's personal instruments. "The Queen has lost her mind," Kalar addressed them. "She believes this alliance will save us. She believes that diluting our sovereignty with human weakness is progress." He paced before them, his movements predatory. "Humans are a virus. They consume, they spread, they die. To place one on the onyx throne, even as a consort, is to invite decay into our very bloodline." One of the obsidian fangs stepped forward. Its voice was modulated synthetic. "The target is heavily guarded, Lord Thorn. The Queen has tripled the security protocols since the wedding incident." "Alara is predictable," Kalar sneered. "She protects him like a treasure. That is her mistake. She thinks the threat comes from the shadows. She thinks I will try to snipe him from a distance again." Kalar stopped pacing. He smiled, revealing fangs that were slightly too long, slightly too serrated. "We will not snipe him," Kalar said. "We will crush him, publicly, irrevocably. We will strike when they feel safest." The Umbra Gate Conference. "The human has anomalous readings," the Fang stated. "During the wedding detonation, telemetry suggests he moved prior to the trigger event." "Luck," Kalar dismissed. "Or cowardice. Humans are twitchy creatures." He flinched, and it saved him. "Do not ascribe competence to an accident. He is a soft thing. When we break him, the galaxy will see that Alara has tied herself to a corpse, and then the Dominion will return to those with the strength to rule it." Adrian sat in the medical bay of the human embassy wing shirtless, while Dr. Mira Solon ran a bioscanner over his chest. The embassy wing was the only place in Nocturne Spire that smelled like Earth antiseptic coffee and recycled air. It was Adrian's sanctuary. "Your cortisol levels are through the roof, Adrian," Mira said, looking at the holographic readout. She was a woman in her late 40s, with graying hair tied back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen too many autopsies. She was a xenopsychologist and one of the few people in the galaxy who knew Adrian's real name, not just his cover identity. "It is the stress of high society," Adrian quipped, flexing his hand. "Do you know how hard it is to hold a teacup with your pinky out for 3 hours? It is an athletic feat." "Cut the crap," Mira said, lowering the scanner. She crossed her arms. "I saw the report from the wedding. The blast pattern. You dodged an entropy charge, Adrian. That is not reflex. That is a prediction." Adrian looked away, staring at a poster on the wall, detailing the anatomy of a Nerathian batwolf. "I got lucky." "You are not lucky," Mira said softly. "You are a ghost walker. Or you used to be." The title hung in the air between them. Ghost Walker, the classified designation for the Terran Confederacy's psionic special forces. Soldiers trained to interface with the void, to bend physics to kill with a thought. "I am retired," Adrian said, his voice hard. "You suppressed your neural pathways," Mira corrected. "But stress triggers them. If you keep living in this pressure cooker, you are going to blow a fuse. Or worse, you are going to blow up the spire." Adrian hopped off the exam table. He walked to the sink and splashed cold water on his face. "I have it under control. I am the harmless husband. I smile, I wave, I make bad jokes." "And what happens when Kalar Thorn decides to finish the job?" Mira asked. "Are you going to joke him to death?" Adrian gripped the edges of the sink until the metal groaned under his fingers. He looked at his reflection. "I killed my own squad, Mira," he whispered. The memory was always there, lurking behind his eyelids. Sirius 4, the ambush, the panic. The moment he reached for the void to save them, and instead drew too much. The scream of reality tearing, the silence afterwards. "I promised I would never open that door again. If I use the power, people die. Good people." "If you don't use it, you die," Mira countered. And Alara dies. Adrian turned around. Alara thinks I am weak. It is better that way. She protects me. It gives her purpose. If she knew what I really was, she would look at me the way everyone else does. Like I am a monster. She is a vampire, Adrian, Mira pointed out dryly. I think she has a high tolerance for monsters. What she won't tolerate is being lied to. I am not lying, Adrian said, grabbing his shirt. I am omitting. There is a difference. Keep telling yourself that, Mira sighed. Here, take these. She tossed him a bottle of pills. Neural dampeners. They will help with the headaches if you start flaring up again. But Adrian, you can't hide forever. Not in a city of predators. That evening, the argument started over a window. Adrian had returned to his quarters to find that the panoramic window overlooking the city had been sealed with a translucent energy shield. It distorted the view, turning the majestic Gothic skyline into a gray smear. When Alara entered the room, an hour later, Adrian was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the blurry wall. You shielded the window, he said, not looking at her. Alara removed her heavy cloak, draping it over a chair. She looked exhausted. Her skin was paler than usual, and the bioluminescence in her eyes was dim. There were drone sightings near the spire, she said, her voice flat. Sniper variants. It was a necessary precaution. You didn't ask me, Adrian said. I do not need to ask permission to save your life, Alara replied, moving toward her vanity table. She began to unfasten the intricate silver clasps of her armor. Adrian stood up. I can't see outside Alara. It feels like a prison cell. It is a fortress, she corrected. And you are the one who insisted on coming here. You agreed to the marriage. You knew the risks. I agreed to be a partner, Adrian said, his voice rising. Not a prisoner. You have guards at my door. You have trackers in my clothes. Now you are bricking up my windows. When does it stop? When will you put me in cryostasis for the next 50 years? Alara spun around, her eyes flashing. If that is what it takes, you do not understand, Adrian. You are so incredibly soft. She walked over to him, looming over him. She was taller than him by 3 inches, and in her anger, she seemed like a titan. I have watched civilizations rise and turn to dust, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I have buried 3 generations of advisors. I have seen stars die. Everything I touch withers, Adrian. Everything except this dominion. And now you are here. You are bright and you are warm and you are so terribly temporary. If Kalar kills you, it is not just a political loss. It is... She stopped, catching herself. Adrian looked at her. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a sudden sharp clarity. It is what, Alara? He asked softly. Alara looked away. She clenched her hands into fists. It is a failure. I do not tolerate failure. Adrian stepped closer. He reached out and, ignoring every protocol of the court, took her hand. Her skin was ice cold. He was warm. The contrast was shocking. I am not glass, he told her. I am tougher than I look. You don't have to wrap me in cotton wool. Alara looked down at their joined hands. She did not pull away. You believe that, she said quietly. Because you are young. You believe in adaptability, in luck. I believe in armor, in walls, in power. Power isn't just about force, Alara, Adrian said. It is about endurance. Humans, we don't live long, sure, but we endure. We adapt. We survive things that should kill us because we are stubborn. Alara looked up at his face. For a moment, the mask of the queen slipped entirely. She looked like a woman who was tired of being strong alone. Then be stubborn, she whispered. Survive. Because I cannot fight this war if I am constantly looking over my shoulder to see if you are still breathing. Deal, Adrian said. He squeezed her hand. But take down the shield on the window. I need to see the stars. Alara hesitated, then nodded once. 50% opacity. That is my final offer. 75% transparency, Adrian countered. 60, Alara said. Done, Adrian smiled. It was a small victory. But as Alara turned away to finish undressing, Adrian felt a knot in his stomach. He was winning her trust piece by piece. But every inch of trust she gave him was built on the lie that he was just a normal man. When the truth came out, and he knew it would, that betrayal would hurt her more than any assassin's blade. The week before the Umbergate conference, the atmosphere in the spire was electric. The Umbergate was a massive space station located in neutral territory, orbiting a brown dwarf star. It was the site where the Human Confederacy and the Nocturne Dominion would sign the final ratification of the alliance. Adrian found himself in the war room, standing in the back, while Alara and her generals reviewed the security schematics of the station. A massive hologram of the Umbergate floated in the center of the room. It was a complex structure of rotating rings and docking pylons. The station is secure, General Krav reported. We have 3 destroyer-class vessels patrolling the perimeter. Internal sensors are operating at 100% efficiency. Adrian squinted at the hologram. He wasn't looking at the ships or the guards. He was looking at the energy grid. To a normal eye, it was a web of blue lines. To Adrian, who had spent 10 years reading void signatures, something was off. There was a subtle fluctuation in Sector 7 near the cargo processing and another in the primary ventilation shafts. It wasn't a mechanical glitch. It was a harmonic resonance. Someone was bleeding energy into the system, masking it as background static. "Excuse me," Adrian said, raising his hand. The room went silent. General Krav looked at Adrian as if a piece of furniture had just started speaking. "The consort has a question," Krav asked, dripping with sarcasm. "Sector 7, Adrian said, pointing at the map. "And the vents. The energy signature is oscillating. It looks like interference." "That is the station's waste heat recyclers," Krav dismissed. "Standard output." "No," Adrian said, stepping forward. He forgot to play the fool for a moment. "It is too rhythmic. It looks like a masking algorithm. Someone is hiding a power draw. If you overlay the thermal output with the magnetic field, you will see." "Enough," Alara's voice cut through the room. Adrian froze. He looked at her. Alara was sitting on her command throne, her face impassive. "General Krav knows his job, Adrian. You are not a structural engineer. You are a diplomat." "Alara, look at the data," Adrian insisted. "If someone has bypassed the sensors in Sector 7, they could smuggle in enough ordnance to crack the station in half." "The sensors are infallible," Krav growled. "Do not presume to lecture me on security, human." "I am asking you to check it," Adrian snapped. "I said enough," Alara stood up. The room trembled slightly. "Adrian, you are letting your paranoia dictate your actions. You are seeing threats where there are none because you are afraid. That is understandable. But do not disrupt my war council with amateur theories." She was doing it again, pushing him back into the box, protecting him by dismissing him. Adrian's jaw tightened. He wanted to scream. He wanted to reach out with his mind and rip the hologram apart to show them the truth. But he couldn't. "Understood, Your Majesty," Adrian said stiffly. "My apologies. I will go back to planning my outfit for the gala." He turned and walked out. As the door closed, Alara sat back down. She looked at Sector 7 on the map. She stared at it for a long moment. "Krav," she said quietly. "Yes, my queen." "Send a team to sweep Sector 7 and the vents." Krav looked surprised. "But you said—" "I know what I said," Alara interrupted. "Do it. Quietly. If there is nothing there, we lose an hour. If the human is right, then we have a problem." The night before the departure for Umbergate, a grand gala was held at the spire. It was the final send-off. Every noble house was in attendance, including House Thorne. Lord Kalar Thorne arrived late, his entrance sucking the air out of the room. He wore armor of polished black chrome, a cape of fur from some extinct beast, and a sword at his hip that hummed with dark energy. He walked straight to the center of the room, where Alara and Adrian were holding court. The music stopped. The guests parted like water. Kalar bowed to Alara. It was a shallow, mocking thing. "My queen, you look radiant, as always." "Lord Kalar." Alara nodded, her voice cold. "I am surprised to see you. I thought you disapproved of this union." "I disapprove of pollution," Kalar said smoothly. "But I respect the crown. I came to wish you a safe journey to the Umber Gate." He turned his eyes to Adrian. Up close, Kalar was terrifying. He smelled of old blood and deep earth. He was at least 7 feet tall, dwarfing Adrian. "And the consort," Kalar said, looking down his nose. "Adrian Cole, the man who would be king." "Just Prince Consort, actually," Adrian said, holding his ground. He felt the power radiating off Kalar. It was immense, ancient, and heavy. "I don't really have the hat for a king." "Tell me, human," Kalar said, stepping closer, invading Adrian's personal space. "Do you know the history of this hall? The stones you stand on were laid before your species discovered fire. We built this empire on strength, on blood. And now here you are." Kalar reached out and flicked the lapel of Adrian's suit. It was a dismissive, insulting gesture. "You are a stain," Kalar whispered, loud enough for the court to hear. "You are a temporary inconvenience, a pet that has been allowed to sit at the table. Do not think that this marriage makes you one of us. When you die, and you will die soon one way or another, we will wash the floor where you stood and forget you ever existed." The room held its breath. This was it, the challenge. Alara stepped forward, her hand moving toward her weapon, but Adrian held up a hand to stop her. Adrian looked up at Kalar. He didn't look afraid. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. "You know Lord Kalar," Adrian said, his voice projecting clearly through the silent hall. "You talk a lot about time, how old you are, how ancient this floor is. It is very impressive." Adrian took a sip of his drink and swirled the liquid. "But back on Earth, we have a saying about things that refuse to change. We call them fossils." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Adrian smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You stand there in your shiny armor talking about blood and purity and the good old days. But honestly, you just sound like a dusty old relic that's afraid of the future. You are terrified of me, aren't you?" Kalar's eyes narrowed to slits. "Terrified of an insect. Terrified that I represent something you can't stop," Adrian continued. "Change, evolution. We humans don't live long, you are right. So we have to make it count. We build, we change, we adapt. You have spent 3,000 years standing in the same room, having the same arguments, afraid that if you let one new idea in, you will crumble." Adrian took a step toward Kalar, closing the gap. "I might be temporary, Kalar, but at least I am alive. You have been dead for centuries. You just haven't laid down yet." The silence was absolute. No one spoke to a High Lord like that. No one. Kalar's face contorted. For a second, his composure broke. His hand twitched toward his sword. The air around him crackled with killing intent. "You have a sharp tongue, boy," Kalar hissed, his voice low and venomous. "Let us see if it still works when I rip it out of your throat." "Is that a threat, Lord Thorn?" Alara's voice rang out like a bell. She was standing next to Adrian, now her hand resting openly on the hilt of her blade. "Are you threatening my husband in my own hall?" Kalar looked at Alara, then back at Adrian. He saw the united front. He saw the trap. If he drew his weapon now, he would be a traitor. He forced himself to relax. He smoothed his cape. He smiled, but it was a rictus of hate. "A jest, my queen," Kalar said. "Merely a jest. Humans have spirits. It will be a shame to see it extinguished." He bowed again, lower this time, mocking them both. Safe travels to Umbra Gate, Kaler said. I shall be watching. He turned and swept out of the hall, his dark cape billowing behind him, like a storm cloud. As he left, the tension broke. The music started up again, hesitant at first, then louder. Adrian let out a breath. His legs felt a little shaky. That was foolish, Alara whispered to him, though there was a strange light in her eyes. You poked a dragon. He was going to bite anyway, Adrian replied quietly. I figured I might as well kick him in the shins first. Alara looked at him. She reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. It was a tender, intimate gesture that shocked them both. You are not entirely useless, Adrian Cole, she said softly. High praise, Adrian smirked. I will put it on my resume. But as he looked at the door where Kalar had exited, Adrian's smile faded. He knew what Kalar's parting words meant. I shall be watching. Kalar wasn't just watching. He was waiting. And the Umbra Gate was the trap. Adrian touched his chest, feeling the hum of the dormant power inside him. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. But as he looked at Alara, at the fierce, proud woman who was trying so hard to protect him, he knew. If the obsidian fangs came for her, he would burn the galaxy down to keep her safe. Come, Alara said, taking his arm. Let us finish this charade. Tomorrow we leave for the stars. After you, my queen, Adrian said. They walked back into the crowd together, a queen of night and a husband of dust moving toward a destiny that would shatter them both. The Umbra Gate was a marvel of interstellar engineering, a massive Taurus station spinning slowly in the void between three major star systems. It was neutral ground, a place where gravity was artificial, and the air was recycled from 1,000 different worlds. Today, it was the center of the galaxy's attention. The grand atrium of the station was a cavernous space domed with transparent aluminum that offered a breathtaking view of the brown dwarf star burning dully in the distance. The light from the star cast long amber shadows across the gathered delegates. There were representatives from the crustacean hegemony, the silicon mines of Alpha Centauri, and of course the high nobility of the Nocturne Dominion. And then there was Adrian Cole. Adrian walked 2 steps behind Queen Alara Nyx, his hands clasped respectfully behind his back. He wore a formal suit of charcoal gray, a sharp contrast to the flowing bioluminescent robes of the vampire court. He felt like a sparrow walking into a gathering of hawks. Keep your head up, Alara whispered, her voice projecting directly into his ear via a microscopic communication bead. You are slouching. I am not slouching, Adrian whispered back, keeping his lips barely moving. I am adopting a posture of non-threatening humility. It is a survival tactic. If I look too confident, Archduke Varen might decide to eat me as an hors d'oeuvre. Alara did not smile, but her shoulders relaxed by a fraction of an inch. She stopped at the center of the atrium, turning to face the assembly. The room fell silent. Her presence was commanding a gravitational pull that drew every eye. She was the picture of eternal strength, her pale skin glowing softly under the amber light, her eyes scanning the room with predatory intelligence. Delegates of the Allied Systems, Alara began, her voice amplified by the station's acoustics. We stand here today not as predators and prey, but as partners. Adrian stood silently, playing his role. The prop rush, the trophy husband. He could hear the whispers ripple through the crowd like a foul wind. Look at it, a reptilian ambassador hissed to his aide, gesturing a claw toward Adrian. So fragile. One snap of the spine and the alliance ends. The queen keeps him as a curiosity, a vampire countess murmured, her eyes fixed on Adrian's neck. A warm blood bag for cold nights. Adrian let the insults wash over him. He kept his expression bland, a mask of polite confusion. But beneath the surface, his senses were screaming. The air in the station felt wrong. It was the same sensation he had felt at the wedding, but magnified. The hum of the station's reactors had a discordant undercurrent, a vibration that rattled his teeth. He glanced at the security perimeter. The station was guarded by a mixed force of human marines and vampire reapers, but they were looking outward toward the docking bays. They were not looking inside. Alara, Adrian, tapped his comm bead using a subvocal frequency. Something is wrong with the power grid. Not now, Adrian, Alara replied, not breaking her speech. I am in the middle of the preamble. I am serious, Adrian insisted. The magnetic fields in the lower sectors are fluctuating. It is not a malfunction. It is a sequence. We swept the station, Adrian. It is clean. Stand still. Adrian ground his teeth. He scanned the upper balconies. There were shadows up there that were too dark, even for the dim lighting of the station. Shadows that did not move with the light source. Suddenly, a chime echoed through the atrium. It was a polite synthetic sound, the kind used to announce a scheduled maintenance cycle. Attention, the station AI announced. Sector 4 environmental stabilizers require recalibration. Please vacate the VIP viewing platform immediately. Sector 4 was where Adrian was standing. Alara was on the main dais in Sector 1. A young aide, a nervous human boy with a clipboard, rushed up to Adrian. Sir Prince Consort, we need to move you. Just a precaution. The atmospheric pressure in this sector is dropping. Adrian looked at Alara. She was deep in a debate with a Silicon Mine delegate. She glanced at him, gave a brief, reassuring nod, and signaled for him to go with the aide. She thought it was a minor annoyance. Adrian knew better. But he had no choice. If he made a scene now, he would look like a panicked child. Lead the way, Adrian said to the aide. They exited the atrium, moving into the sleek white corridors of the station's inner ring. The aide walked fast, checking his datapad nervously. Where are we going? Adrian asked. The security safe room is up a level. Alternate route, sir? The aide stammered. The lifts are locked down. They turned a corner, and the white walls gave way to the gray industrial plating of the service sectors. The air grew colder. The hum of machinery became a roar. Adrian stopped. He reached out and grabbed the aide's shoulder. Who paid you? Adrian asked, his voice, losing all traces of the bumbling husband. The aide froze. He looked up at Adrian, eyes wide with terror. I don't... Go, Adrian said, shoving the boy back toward the main corridor. Run, now. The boy didn't argue. He scrambled away, disappearing around the bend. Adrian stood alone in the dark corridor. He was in the cargo processing sector. Rows of massive shipping containers created a labyrinth of steel canyons. The lights flickered and died. Okay, Adrian whispered to the darkness. You have me. Let's get this over with. From the shadows they emerged. There were 6 of them. They wore armor that shifted and rippled, mimicking the background texture active camouflage. As they stepped into the open, the camouflage faded to matte black. They held serrated vibroblades that hummed with a violet energy, the obsidian fangs. The leader, a vampire with a mask that covered the lower half of his face, stepped forward. He held a device in his hand, a signal jammer. The Queen is busy, the leader said. His voice was distorted metallic. She believes there is a malfunction in the life support systems. By the time she realizes you are missing, you will be a hostage video sent to every screen in the galaxy. Adrian loosened his tie. He unbuttoned his suit jacket and folded it neatly, placing it on a nearby crate. A hostage video, Adrian repeated. What is the plan? Kalar is losing his touch. I expected an execution. You are worth more alive, the leader sneered. We will make you beg. We will make you weep for your mother. And the galaxy will see just how pathetic the human race truly is. Then, we will kill you. The 6 assassins fanned out, encircling him. They moved with supernatural speed, blurring at the edges. They were apex predators, ancient and lethal. To them, Adrian was a soft, fleshy bag of bones with a pulse of 60 beats per minute. Soft prey, one of the assassins hissed from behind him. Adrian sighed. He rolled his sleeves up, exposing his forearms. "You know," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone. "My wife thinks I am weak. She worries about me constantly. She put baby-proofing on the corners of the coffee table." The leader laughed. "She is wise. You look like you would break in a strong wind." "She is right," Adrian agreed. "I am weak. I get tired, I get sad, I bleed. But you are making a mistake. You are confusing weakness with harmlessness." He closed his eyes. Somewhere 3 decks above, Alara was speaking. She was exposed. The attack on the station was starting. He could feel the vibrations of breaching charges detonating on the outer hull. They were going to squeeze the station, panic the delegates, and force Alara to surrender to save him. He could not let that happen. Adrian reached deep into the place he had locked away 10 years ago. He found the door in his mind, the one marked with danger signs and guilt. He kicked it open. The air in the cargo bay suddenly became heavy. It wasn't atmospheric pressure. It was gravitational mass. The assassin behind Adrian lunged, aiming to hamstring him. Adrian didn't turn. He didn't dodge. He simply expanded. A pulse of invisible force erupted from his body. It was a void push, a kinetic blast of psionic energy. The assassin was lifted off his feet as if hit by a wrecking ball. He flew backward, 40 feet, smashing into a shipping container with a sound like a thunderclap. The metal of the container cratered inward, embedding the vampire in the steel. The other 5 assassins froze. Adrian opened his eyes. The whites were gone. They were twin pools of absolute darkness, swirling with nebular dust. "You are not the first monsters I have met," Adrian said. His voice echoed, not just in the air, but inside their skulls. "But you might be the last." "Kill him!" the leader screamed, abandoning the capture order. 2 assassins blurred forward, moving faster than the human eye could track. They were a whirlwind of blades. To Adrian, they were moving underwater. He saw the trajectory of the first blade. He didn't block it. He bent the space around it. He twisted his wrist, and gravity obeyed. The assassin's sword arm was suddenly subjected to 10 times standard gravity. The weapon became impossibly heavy. The assassin stumbled, his momentum thrown off balance. Adrian stepped inside the guard. He placed his palm on the assassin's chest plate. Pulse. A concentrated shockwave traveled from his palm, through the armor, and into the vampire's nervous system. The assassin convulsed and dropped unconscious before he hit the floor. The second attacker swung for Adrian's head. Adrian ducked, not by crouching, but by increasing his own density, dropping like a stone. As the blade passed over him, he grabbed the assassin's ankle. He stood up, using his telekinetic grip to swing the fully armored vampire like a rag doll. He slammed the assassin into the floor. The impact cracked the reinforced concrete foundation. 3 down, 3 to go. The leader backed away, his eyes wide behind his mask. What are you?" "I am the husband," Adrian said. He walked forward. The remaining 2 assassins opened fire with plasma pistols. Bolts of superheated energy screamed toward him. Adrian raised his left hand. The air in front of him shimmered. He created a singularity, a microscopic black hole that existed for a fraction of a second. The plasma bolts were sucked into the void, vanishing into nothingness. He flicked his fingers. The singularity collapsed, releasing the absorbed energy in a shockwave that knocked the shooters off their feet. Adrian did not want to kill them. Death was easy. Death was messy. He wanted to dismantle them. He reached out with his mind and grabbed the 2 shooters who were scrambling to get up. He lifted them into the air, suspending them 5 feet off the ground. He tightened his mental grip, not on their throats, but on their armor. With a grinding screech of tearing metal, he crushed their weapons in their hands. He squeezed their tactical vests until the ceramic plates shattered, pinning their arms to their sides. Then he threw them. He tossed them into an open cargo container and slammed the heavy steel doors shut with a thought. The locking mechanism twisted and fused, sealing them inside. Only the leader remained. The vampire leader was trembling. He had fought warlords. He had fought Jedi Knights of the Outer Rim. He had never seen a human manipulate the fundamental laws of physics with his bare hands. "Kalar said you were a pet," the leader stammered, backing up until he hit a wall. "Kalar is a fossil," Adrian said. "He doesn't understand that the universe has changed." Adrian stopped 3 feet from the leader. The shadows in the room seemed to coil around Adrian, responding to his mood. "You were going to use me to hurt her," Adrian said softly. The darkness in his eyes swirled violently. "That was your mistake. You can attack me. You can insult me. But nobody touches the Queen." He raised his hand. The leader gasped as an invisible hand gripped his throat, lifting him up the wall. Meanwhile, in the grand atrium, chaos had erupted. The lights had failed. Emergency strobes painted the room in flashes of red. The delegates were screaming, scrambling for the exits. Alara Nyx was a whirlwind of death. She held a long silver blade, cutting down a squad of cloaked attackers who had rappelled from the ceiling. She moved with a grace that was terrifying to behold, decapitating 2 enemies in a single stroke. "Where is the consort?" she screamed at General Krav, who was firing his bolter into the mezzanine. "We lost his signal," Krav shouted, over the noise of the firefight. "He is in the lower sectors. Sector 4 is completely dark." Alara felt a spike of ice in her heart. Adrian, alone, in the dark, with these killers. "Secure the delegates," she ordered. "I am going to him." "My queen, you cannot go alone," Krav protested. Alara ignored him. She sprinted toward the service corridors, her speed cracking the floor tiles beneath her boots. She expected to find him dead. She expected to find his broken body, a message from Kalar to break her spirit. The thought made her vision blur with red fury. She would burn Kalar's fortress to the ground. She would salt the earth where he stood. She reached the cargo sector. The door was sealed. She ripped it off its hinges with her bare hands, the metal screaming in protest. "Adrian!" she shouted, rushing into the gloom. Then she stopped. The air in the cargo bay was thick with dust and the smell of ozone. It crackled with residual energy, a taste she recognized from history books. Psionic resonance, the smell of the void. She looked around. A shipping container was caved in, a vampire embedded in the metal, like a grotesque sculpture. The floor was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Another container was sealed shut, the locking bars twisted like wet clay. And in the center of the devastation, Adrian stood. He was holding the leader of the Obsidian Fangs against the wall. He wasn't touching him. He was standing 3 feet away, his hand raised. The vampire leader was dangling 2 feet off the ground, clawing at an invisible grip on his throat. Alara froze. Her mind refused to process the image. This was Adrian. Her Adrian. The man who tripped over his own feet. The man who needed a sweater when it was 60 degrees. Adrian turned his head. For a second, Alara saw the void in his eyes. It was a look of absolute terrifying power. It was the look of a being that could extinguish a star. Then the blackness receded. The brown returned. The tension left Adrian's shoulders. The invisible grip vanished. The vampire leader dropped to the floor, gasping for air, unconscious from the lack of oxygen. Adrian looked at his hands, then at Alara. He looked like a child who had been caught standing over a broken vase. "Alara," he said, his voice hoarse. Alara walked forward slowly. Her sword hung loosely in her hand. She stepped over the unconscious body of an elite assassin, a warrior that would have taken 3 of her guards to subdue. "Adrian," she whispered. Adrian leaned against a crate, suddenly looking exhausted. He wiped a trickle of blood from his nose. Adrian started, then stopped. He offered a weak, crooked smile. "I told them I was allergic to violence. They didn't listen." Alara reached him. She grabbed his shoulders, her eyes scanning him for injuries. She looked at the devastation around them, then back at his face. "You did this," she said. It wasn't a question. I had to, Adrian said quietly. He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. They were going to use me to get to you. I couldn't let them. What are you? Alara asked. The fear in her voice was real. Not fear for him, but fear of the unknown. Adrian looked up. I am your husband. That is all that matters. Alara stared at him. The puzzle pieces slammed into place. The reflex at the wedding. The way he moved. The confidence he hid behind the jokes. She didn't see a pet anymore. She didn't see a fragile thing. She saw a predator. One that had been sleeping in her bed pretending to be a sheep. The silence stretched heavy and dangerous. Then Adrian's legs buckled. The adrenaline crash hit him. Alara caught him. She held him up, her arms strong and sure. You idiot, she hissed, but her voice was shaking. You terrible lying idiot. I know, Adrian mumbled against her shoulder. Am I in trouble? Yes, Alara said fiercely. Immeasurable trouble. She pulled back to look at him. You destroyed an elite strike team, alone, without a weapon. I had a weapon, Adrian tapped his temple. It just gives me a really bad migraine. Alara looked at the unconscious assassins. She realized what he had done. He hadn't slaughtered them. He had neutralized them. Even with that terrifying power, he had chosen restraint. Can you walk? She asked. I think so, Adrian said. But my dignity is sprained. Alara let out a short, incredulous laugh. It sounded like a sob. Come on. The sound of boots echoed in the corridor. General Krav and 2 squads of royal guards burst into the room, weapons raised. My queen, Krav shouted. We secured the... He stopped. He saw the carnage. He saw the vampire embedded in the steel wall. He saw the twisted metal. Krav looked at Alara, then at Adrian, who was leaning heavily on her. What happened here? Krav whispered, his eyes wide. Who intervened? Was it a Jedi? Alara looked at her general. She tightened her grip on Adrian's waist. The consort, Alara said clearly, her voice echoing off the steel walls. The consort secured the sector. Krav's jaw dropped. The guards lowered their weapons, staring at the human who looked like he was about to pass out. Him? Krav asked, disbelief dripping from the word. Adrian lifted his head. He managed a weak wave. Surprise. The news traveled faster than light. By the time the delegates were evacuated and the station was secured, the rumors were already flying. The images from the security cameras in the cargo bay, which had flickered back on for the final moments of the fight, were leaked. They showed a human standing amidst wreckage. They showed the obsidian fangs, the boogeymen of the underworld, broken and defeated. In the medical bay of the station, Adrian sat on a biobed. Dr. Mira Solon was fusing a hairline fracture in his wrist. Alara stood by the door, arms crossed, watching him. She hadn't left his side for 3 hours. The council is in an uproar, Alara said. Half of them want to give you a medal. The other half wants to quarantine you. What do you want? Adrian asked quietly. Alara walked over to the bed. She touched the side of his face. Her fingers were cool. I want to know why you hid it, she said. Because power scares people, Adrian said. And I didn't want you to look at me the way you are looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Like I am a weapon. Like I am dangerous. Alara leaned in. She kissed his forehead. It was a gesture of possession, but also of respect. You are dangerous, Adrian, she whispered. And I have never been more attracted to you in my life. Adrian blinked. Oh, well, that went better than expected. Far away in the dark fortress of the Thorn lineage, Lord Kalar watched the report. His lieutenant, the second in command of the Obsidian Fangs, stood trembling before him. We failed, my lord, the lieutenant said. The team lost. He is a monster, a ghost walker. We did not know. Kalar sat on his throne of bone and iron. He stared at the frozen image on the screen, a blurry shot of Adrian with eyes of black void. Kalar began to laugh. It was a low, dry sound. "Failed?" Kalar asked. "You fool. We have succeeded beyond my wildest dreams." He stood up and walked to the screen, tracing the outline of Adrian's face. "I did not just want to kill a husband," Kalar said. "I wanted to expose a threat. Look at him. He is not a diplomat. He is a weapon of mass destruction wrapped in skin. And now the galaxy knows it." Kalar turned back to his lieutenant, a cruel smile stretching his face. "The Queen has brought a bomb into her bed. The other systems will not tolerate this. The crustaceans, the silicon mines will see this as an act of aggression by humanity. The alliance will crack. Fear will do what my assassins could not." "What are your orders, Lord?" "Prepare the fleet," Kalar said, "and send a message to the archivist. Tell him I have found the Eidolon. It is awake." Kalar looked back at the screen at the eyes of the man who had crushed his elite team. "You think you won human," Kalar whispered, "but you just started the war that will burn you alive." The aftermath of the Umbra Gate incident was not a celebration. It was a quarantine. The Nocturne Spire, usually a bastion of silent Gothic grace, was vibrating with the cacophony of panicked politics. The news had traveled across the subspace relays faster than light. The human consort, the fragile pet of Queen Alara Nyx, had single-handedly dismantled a squad of the galaxy's deadliest assassins, using forbidden psionic arts. For 3 days, Adrian Cole had not left his quarters. He sat on the edge of his bed staring at his hands. They looked normal. They were human hands with calluses on the fingers and a small scar on the left thumb from a kitchen knife accident years ago. But when he closed his eyes, he could still feel the hum. It was a low-frequency vibration in his marrow, the residual echo of the void he had summoned. He had broken his promise. 10 years ago, on the colony moon of Sirius IV, he had sworn never to open that door again. He had buried the Ghostwalker persona under layers of sarcasm and bad jokes. He had convinced himself that Adrian Cole was just a man who liked old movies and spicy noodles. But on the Umbra Gate, the monster had come out, and it had felt terrifyingly good. A chime at the door broke his trance. "Enter, Adrian," said his voice raspy. The door slid open. It wasn't Alara. It was Dr. Mira Solon, accompanied by a figure Adrian had not met before. "You look like hell, Adrian," Mira said, walking in with her datapad tucked under her arm. "And I say that as a medical professional who has seen corpses with better complexions." "Thank you, Dr. Solon," Adrian replied, managing a weak smile. "I aim to please. Who is your friend?" The figure beside Mira stepped forward. He was tall, draped in heavy robes of crimson and gold. His skin was a translucent blue, and instead of a nose, he had a series of small, fluttering gill slits. He was a cephalon, a species known for their obsessive hoarding of knowledge. "This is Archivist Saren," Mira introduced. "He is the foremost expert on pre-Dominion history and ancient xenotech. I called him in." "A ghostwalker," Saren said. His voice sounded wet like stones shifting underwater. "I thought your kind was a myth, or extinct. The records state that the Terran Confederacy purged the psionic battalions after the Sirius incident." "They did," Adrian said, his eyes darkening. "I am just a ghost that forgot to fade away." "We need to talk, Adrian," Mira said, her tone serious. "About what you did on the station, and about the energy signature you released." "I saved my wife," Adrian said defensively. "That is the only data point that matters." "Is it?" Saren asked. He tapped a long, spindly finger against a holographic projector he was carrying. "Because according to my readings, the energy you manipulated shares a 99% harmonic frequency with a weapon system I have not seen referenced in 5,000 years. You did not just use psionics consort Cole. You interfaced with something older." Adrian looked away. I don't want to talk about it. You don't have a choice, Mira said. The High Council is in session right now. Archduke Varen is calling for your execution. He claims you are a biological weapon sent by humanity to destabilize the throne. Adrian laughed a dry, humorless sound. For once, I agree with the vampire. In the Grand Council chamber, the air was cold enough to freeze water. Queen Alara Nyx sat on the onyx throne. She wore her full battle regalia armor of woven starlight and a crown of black iron. Her face was a mask of imperious calm, but her hands gripped the armrests of the throne with enough force to crack the stone. Below her, the high lords of the Nocturne Dominion were shouting. "He is a threat," Archduke Varen roared, pacing the floor. "We saw the footage. He crushed the obsidian fangs as if they were insects. No human possesses that power naturally. He is an experiment, a sleeper agent." "He saved the queen," shouted Lady Alara, a younger noble from the progressive faction. "If not for him, the obsidian fangs would have ransomed the throne." "And what stops him from turning that power on us?" Varen countered, spinning to face the assembly. "He walks among us sleeping in the royal chambers. We thought he was a pet. We were wrong. He is a viper. We must execute him before he strikes again, or at the very least imprison him in the stasis vaults." "Enough," Alara said. She did not shout. She did not need to. Her voice carried the weight of 6 centuries of rule. The chamber fell silent instantly. Alara stood up. She walked down the steps of the dais, her cape flowing behind her like a river of blood. She stopped inches from Archduke Varen. "You speak of my husband," Alara said softly. "Not a subject, not a prisoner. My husband." "I speak of a monster, my queen," Varen hissed, though he lowered his eyes. "A monster that makes a mockery of our strength." "He defended this empire when your guards failed," Alara said, her voice icy. "The obsidian fangs bypassed our sensors. They defeated my personal detail. It was the human who stood when the immortals fell. If that is a monster, then perhaps we need more monsters." "He deceived you," Varen pressed, desperate. "He hid his nature. Can you trust a liar?" Alara hesitated. It was a fraction of a second, but the court saw it. She did feel deceived. The image of Adrian, her bumbling, clumsy Adrian, standing amidst the wreckage with eyes of void black, haunted her. She felt foolish for having tried to protect him. She felt betrayed that he had not trusted her with his truth. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Awe. And a terrifying magnetic pull. "I trust his actions," Alara said finally. "And his actions saved my life. Consort Cole remains under my protection. Any move against him is an act of treason against the crown." She turned and swept out of the chamber. But as she walked down the long, torchlit corridor, her confidence crumbled. She leaned against a pillar, closing her eyes for a moment. She had defended him publicly, but privately, she didn't know who he was anymore. Later that evening, the confrontation that had been brewing for days finally erupted. Alara entered their shared chambers to find Adrian packing a bag. It was a small, battered duffel bag he had brought from Earth. He was throwing clothes into it with frantic, jerky movements. "What are you doing?" Alara asked, closing the door and sealing it. Adrian didn't look up. "I am leaving, Alara. I requested a shuttle clearance an hour ago. Your flight control denied it. You need to override the command." "You are not going anywhere," Alara said, walking into the room. "The council is calling for your blood. If you step foot outside, the Spire Varen's agents will kill you before you reach the spaceport." "Let them try," Adrian muttered. Then he stopped, taking a deep breath. "No. That is the problem, isn't it? If they try, I will kill them. And then I will be exactly what they say I am. A murderer." He turned to face her. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed and his hands were shaking. "I can't stay here, Alara. I am a liability. Varen is right. I am a bomb. You saw what happened at the station. I barely stopped. Another second and I would have collapsed the hull. I would have killed everyone on that deck. But you didn't, Alara said, stepping closer. You stopped. This time, Adrian shouted. The sound echoed off the stone walls. This time I stopped. But what about next time Kalar knows now? He knows what I am. He won't send assassins next time. He will send an army. He will push me until I break, and when I break, people die. I killed my own squad, Alara. On Sirius 4, I lost control and I flayed their minds. He collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. I came here to hide, he whispered. I thought if I married the alien queen, if I played the part of the weak, useless husband, I could just fade away. I could be safe. You were supposed to be the strong one. Alara stood frozen. She looked at this man, this powerful, terrifying weapon of a man crumpling under the weight of his own guilt. She realized then how arrogant she had been. She had spent months pitying him for his fragility, never realizing that his fragility was a cage he had built to protect the world from himself. She sat down next to him. She hasn't touched him yet. She just sat in silence. You lied to me, Alara said softly. I know, Adrian mumbled. You let me treat you like a child. You let me shield you, protect you, talk down to you. You let me believe I was the only thing standing between you and death. Adrian looked up, his eyes full of misery. It gave you purpose, Alara. You needed to feel needed, and I needed to feel contained. It worked, until it didn't. Alara looked at her hands. I did not need to feel needed. I needed to believe that there was something innocent in my life, something that wasn't stained with centuries of politics and blood. I looked at you and I saw something simple, something pure. She turned to him, her mercury eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I was wrong, she admitted. I insulted you. I looked at your restraint and called it weakness. I looked at your mercy and called it cowardice. For that I am sorry. Adrian stared at her. He had expected anger. He had expected her to banish him. He hadn't expected an apology. You don't have to apologize, Adrian said. I played the part too well. We are a pair, aren't we? Alara let out a bitter laugh. The vampire queen who is a slave to her throne, and the human soldier who is a prisoner of his own power. We are both weapons, Adrian. We are both tools that others try to wield. She reached out and took his hand. He flinched slightly, then relaxed. Do not leave, Alara said, her voice fierce. Do not run away. If you leave now, Kalar wins. He proves that we cannot coexist. He proves that fear is stronger than trust. I am dangerous, Alara, Adrian warned. If I stay, I will bring war to your doorstep. War is already here, Alara said. I would rather fight it with a wolf by my side than a sheep. She squeezed his hand. Stop hiding, Adrian. Be the monster if you have to be, but be my monster. Adrian looked at her. For the first time in 10 years, the knot of guilt in his chest loosened slightly. He wasn't forgiven, he would never forgive himself, but he was seen, and he wasn't rejected. I don't know if I can, Adrian whispered. Then we will find out together, Alara said. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't the chaste, ceremonial kiss of their wedding. It was desperate, hungry, and full of shared fear. It was a kiss between two people standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding to jump together. The intimate moment was interrupted by the chime of the door. Adrian pulled back, breathless. Alara smoothed her hair, her regal mask sliding back into place, though her eyes remained soft. Enter, Alara commanded. Dr. Mira Solon and Archivist Saren walked in. They looked agitated. I apologize for the intrusion, Your Majesty, Mira said, bowing quickly. But we found something. The investigation into the Obsidian Fangs wasn't just a hit squad. Explain, Alara said, standing up. Archivist Saren activated his holographic projector. A map of the galaxy appeared with glowing red lines connecting several points. I analyzed the wreckage of the assassin's equipment, Saren burbled. Specifically the signal jammers and their biotelemetry suits. They were not transmitting data back to Kalar's fortress. They were transmitting data to you, Consort Cole. To me, Adrian frowned. I don't understand. Not to your comms, Saren corrected. To your biology. The suits were designed to emit a specific psionic resonance frequency. It was a catalyst. Mira stepped forward. Adrian, they weren't trying to kill you. Well, they were, but that was secondary. They were trying to stress you. They needed you to flare. They needed you to open the void gate inside your mind. Why? Adrian asked, a cold dread settling in his stomach. To calibrate the lock, Saren said ominously. The hologram changed. It showed a rotating 3D model of a massive ancient structure. It looked like a spire but twisted, organic, and terrifying. This is the Eidolon, Saren said. A weapon from the dark age of humanity. The legends say it was a psionic amplifier capable of enslaving entire star systems. It was thought to be destroyed. It wasn't destroyed, Adrian whispered. He felt sick. It was dismantled. Wait, Alara looked at Adrian. You know about this? I heard rumors in the program, Adrian said, his voice hollow. The Ghostwalkers were trying to recreate something ancient. They called it the Source. But the project was scrapped. Kalar has found the main chassis of the Eidolon, Saren said. It is located in his fortress in the Dead Zone. But a chassis is useless without a power source. Or rather a key. Saren pointed a long finger at Adrian. The resonance data they collected from you during the fight confirms it. You, Consort Cole, possess a unique neural architecture. Your mind is the key. Kalar didn't just want to expose you. He wanted to confirm that you are the missing component. He wants to plug me in, Adrian realized, horror dawning on him. He wants to use me to activate the Eidolon. If he succeeds, Alara said, her voice hard as steel, he won't just take the throne. He will have the power to dominate the minds of every being in the sector. Vampire and human alike, Mira nodded. That is why he taunted you. That is why he sent the team. He needed to verify that you were compatible before he made his final move. So what do we do? Adrian asked. If I stay here, he will come for me. If I run, he hunts me. We do not run, Alara said. She walked over to the map and pointed at the red marker indicating Kalar's fortress. We attack. Attacking Kalar's fortress is suicide, Mira said bluntly. It is in the Dead Zone. Navigation is impossible. His defenses are impenetrable. Not impossible, Adrian said. He stood up, looking at the map. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by a cold, tactical resolve. I can navigate the Dead Zone. My ability lets me see the gravitational currents. And I know the fortress, Alara added. I played there as a child 3 centuries ago before Kalar turned traitor. I know the secret passages. The Council will never approve a preemptive strike, Saren noted. They are too busy arguing about arresting the consort. Then the Council will not be informed, Alara declared. She turned to Adrian. This ends now. We go to him. We cut the head off the snake before he can build his god. Just us, Adrian asked. A surgical strike, Alara said. You, me, Mira for medical support, Saren for the tech, and my 2 most loyal guards. We take the Phantom, my personal stealth yacht. We leave within the hour. This is treason, Mira pointed out, though she was already checking her medical bag. If we fail, we die. If we survive, we will probably get executed for unauthorized military action. Tuesday, Adrian shrugged. Sounds like a typical Tuesday. He looked at Alara. Are you sure about this? You are risking your crown. I am risking my world, Alara said. She reached up and unclasped her heavy ceremonial cape, letting it fall to the floor. She stood in her tactical bodysuit, looking lethal and free. And I am done letting old men decide my fate. Are you with me, husband? Adrian looked at the cape on the floor. He looked at the woman who was willing to throw away an empire for him. He reached into his duffel bag. He didn't pull out clothes. He pulled out a sleek black visor and a pair of fingerless tactical gloves, his old Ghostwalker gear. He put the visor on. It obscured his eyes, hiding the human warmth, giving him the appearance of the weapon everyone feared. "I am with you, my queen," Adrian said. "Let's go hunt a lord." The hangar bay was quiet. The Phantom was a sleek vessel, shaped like a dagger, painted in radar-absorbent matte black. Alara and her small team moved quickly through the shadows. 2 royal guards, heavily armored and silent, flanked the group. Mira and Saren were already boarding carrying crates of equipment. As they reached the ramp, a figure stepped out from behind a pylon. It was Archduke Varen. He was not alone. He had a dozen house soldiers with him, weapons leveled at Alara and Adrian. "I knew it," Varen sneered. "Running away with the monster Alara, I expected better from a Nyx." Alara stopped. She didn't draw her weapon. She just looked at him with disappointment. "Stand aside, Varen. You do not understand what is at stake." "I understand perfectly," Varen said. "You are compromised. You are bewitched by this human filth. I am relieving you of command for the good of the Dominion." "Varen," Adrian stepped forward. His voice was distorted slightly by the comms in his visor. "Go home." "Silence, creature," Varen shouted. "Fire, kill the humans, spare the queen." The soldiers raised their rifles. Adrian didn't flinch. He didn't raise a shield. He didn't blast them. He simply looked at them. He reached into the void, but this time he didn't pull out force. He pulled out presence. He projected the sheer, crushing weight of the Eidolon's frequency, the specific dread that Saren had identified. The soldiers froze. Their hands shook. It wasn't mind control. It was primal fear. Their lizard brains were screaming that they were standing in front of a predator that ate stars. "I said," Adrian repeated, his voice calm, but layering over itself with a harmonic resonance, "Go home." The soldiers dropped their weapons. They couldn't help it. The instinct to flee overrode their loyalty. They turned and ran, scrambling over each other to get out of the hangar. Varen stood alone. He was trembling, fighting the urge to run. He looked at Adrian with pure horror. "What are you?" Varen whispered. "I am the consort," Adrian said. Alara walked past Varen. She didn't even look at him. She walked up the ramp of the ship. "Adrian!" she called out. Adrian turned his back on Varen. He walked up the ramp. As the airlock hissed shut, Varen collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, realizing that for the first time in the history of the Dominion, the true power was not sitting on the throne, but standing beside it. The Phantom engines flared a silent blue burn, and the ship shot out of the hangar, punching through the atmospheric shield and vanishing into the eternal night of Nerath Prime. They were alone now. No backup. No extraction plan. Just a vampire, a human, and a ghost from the past flying straight into the heart of darkness. As the ship entered warp, Adrian sat in the co-pilot seat next to Alara. He took off his visor. His hands were shaking again. "I didn't hurt them," he said, needing to say it. "I know," Alara said. She reached over and engaged the autopilot, then took his hand. "You scared them. Fear is a valid tactic." "I feel like I am walking into a trap," Adrian admitted. "We are," Alara agreed. "But it is the only way to spring it without getting caught." She looked out at the streaking stars. "We are going to end this, Adrian, one way or another. And when we come back, if we come back, things will have to change." "If we come back," Adrian said, staring into the black, "I don't think I will be the same person." "Good," Alara said softly. "I was getting tired of the fake Adrian anyway." The ship hurled them toward the dead zone, toward Kalar, and toward the sleeping god that waited in Adrian's blood. The dead zone was a graveyard of stars. It was a region of space where the fundamental laws of physics had been bruised by a war fought 5,000 years ago. Asteroids did not drift here. They hung suspended in a thick, bruised nebula of violet gas and static discharge. The wreckage of ancient dreadnoughts, titanium skeletons the size of cities, floated silently alongside the rock, their broken hulls serving as monuments to forgotten hatreds. The phantom moved through this celestial boneyard like a needle threading a wound. Inside the cockpit, the silence was absolute. Adrian sat in the co-pilot's chair. His eyes closed, his hands gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity. He was not flying with sensors. The nebula blinded them. He was flying by feel. 3 degrees port, Adrian whispered, his voice tight. There is a gravitational shear ahead. It will tear the wings off if we hit it. Alara adjusted the yoke instantly. She did not question him. She steered the sleek black ship into the darkness, trusting the man beside her, more than the millions of credits worth of navigational computers. We are close, Alara said softly. I can feel the pulse of the fortress. I am hungry. Adrian opened his eyes. They were dark, reflecting the violet light of the nebula. It isn't the fortress, Alara. It's the echo. It knows I am here. Ahead of them, emerging from the mist, like a jagged tooth, was the stronghold of Lord Kalar Thorn. It was built into the hollowed-out shell of a moon-sized asteroid. Towers of black iron twisted upward, defying gravity, tethered to the rock by chains of pulsating energy. It was a place of nightmares, a fusion of vampiric Gothic architecture and the brutal industrial lines of ancient human weaponry. He is waiting for us, Dr. Mira Solon said from the rear seat. She was clutching a medical kit, her face pale but determined. Beside her, Archivist Saren was scanning the readings on his datapad, his gill slits fluttering with agitation. The energy readings are off the scale, Saren murmured. It is not just psionic energy. It is a sentient waveform. It is calling out. Let's go answer the door, Adrian said. He initiated the landing sequence. The Phantom touched down on a rusted landing pad jutting out over the abyss. The moment the landing gear locked, the airlock of the fortress hissed open. No guards, no automated turrets, just an open mouth waiting to swallow them. Alara stood up and drew her sword. The blade hummed a shard of pure starlight. Stay close, she ordered. Mira, Saren, keep behind the guards. Adrian. She looked at him. He was putting on his tactical gloves, his movements methodical, precise. He looked like a soldier going to war, but his eyes looked like a man going to his execution. I am right here, Adrian said. Let's finish this. The throne room of Kalar Thorn was a cavernous hall, dominated by a massive circular machine built into the floor. It hummed with a deep, sickening resonance that made Adrian's teeth ache. Kalar sat on a raised dais at the far end, clad in armor that seemed to be woven from the shadows themselves. He looked ancient, powerful, and utterly relaxed. Welcome, Kalar's voice boomed, amplified by the acoustics of the hall. I must admit I am impressed. You navigated the dead zone without a scratch. The human has his uses. Alara stepped forward, flanked by her 2 royal guards. Surrender, Kalar. Your coup has failed. The council knows of your treachery. The council is a gathering of frightened sheep, Kalar scoffed. He stood up, descending the stairs with slow, heavy steps. And you, Alara, you are a shepherd who has fallen in love with a wolf in sheep's clothing. He stopped 10 feet from them, his eyes locked onto Adrian. Tell her human, Kalar commanded. Tell her what you really are. Tell her why I brought you here. Adrian stepped forward. The hum of the machine on the floor was getting louder, syncing with the beat of his heart. You brought me here because you can't turn the key yourself, Adrian said, his voice steady. You found the chassis. You found the weapon. But you don't have the interface. Correct, Kalar smiled, revealing his serrated fangs. The Eidolon. He gestured to the machine. The archivist called it a weapon, Kalar continued. But that is a simplification. The Eidolon is not a gun. It is a mind. A psionic artificial intelligence created by the Terran Confederacy during their most desperate hour. It was designed to link with a human host to amplify their aggression, to remove their empathy, to turn a single soldier into an army capable of wiping out solar systems. Alara looked at Adrian. Adrian, he is right, Adrian whispered. It was the ultimate super soldier program, but it failed. The Eidolon was too strong. It didn't just amplify aggression, it consumed the host. It burned through them like paper. Until you, Kalar interrupted. He looked at Adrian with a twisted sort of reverence. 10 years ago, Sirius 4, you were the only one who survived the link, weren't you? I didn't survive it, Adrian said, his fists clenching. I caged it. Plot twist, Adrian muttered to Alara, a dark humor surfacing. I'm not just a battery. I'm in a jail cell. You trapped the Eidolon's consciousness within your own mind, Kalar explained to the room. You used your own will to suppress a god. That is why you are so tired, Adrian. That is why you hide. Because every second of every day you are wrestling a demon that wants to eat the world. Kalar spread his arms. And I am here to set it free. I won't let you, Adrian said. I will die before I let it out. I know, Kalar nodded. That is why I don't need your permission. I need your trauma. Kalar moved. He moved faster than I thought. One moment he was standing still. The next, he was a blur of motion. Alara lunged to intercept him, but Kalar backhanded her with the force of a battering ram. She flew across the room, smashing into a pillar of black iron. Alara! Adrian screamed. He raised his hand to strike, but Kalar was already past him. Kalar wasn't aiming for Adrian. He was aiming for the weak link. Kalar grabbed Dr. Mira Solon by the throat. He lifted her off the ground. Mira clawed at his gauntlet, her feet kicking helplessly. The sound of her struggling breath echoed in the silent hall. Let her go, Adrian roared. The air around him began to distort. The shadows in the room lengthened. Open the door, Adrian, Kalar hissed. Or the doctor dies. Then the archivist. Then the queen. He squeezed. Mira gasped a terrible wet sound. Don't, Mira wheezed, staring at Adrian. Don't do it. Choice is an illusion, Kalar said. He tightened his grip. There was a sickening crunch of cartilage. Something in Adrian snapped. It wasn't a decision. It was a dam breaking. The scream that tore from Adrian's throat wasn't human. It was a harmonic frequency that shattered the glass in the viewports. The machine on the floor roared to life. The violet nebula outside seemed to rush into the room. Adrian's body arched back. His eyes didn't just turn black. They began to weep a black viscous fluid. The veins in his neck turned black. Yes, Kalar shouted, dropping Mira, who crumpled to the floor, gasping, but alive and turning to face the storm he had summoned. Adrian was gone. The thing standing there was a silhouette of pure void. It hovered a foot off the ground. The air around it disintegrated. Finally, a voice spoke. It didn't come from Adrian's mouth. It came from everywhere. It sounded like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. Free. The Eidolon had awakened. It looked at Kalar. You are the keykeeper. I am your master, Kalar shouted, raising his hands to cast a binding spell. I offer you a galaxy of blood. Submit to me and we will rule. The Eidolon didn't listen. It raised a hand. Kalar was blasted backward by a wave of telekinetic force so powerful it stripped the armor from his chest. He slammed into the wall, coughing up blood. No masters, the Eidolon roared. Only hunger. The entity turned its gaze toward the fallen queen. Alara was pulling herself up, shaking her head to clear the dizziness. Vampire, the Eidolon hissed. Parasite. It raised a hand toward Alara. A ball of singularity energy formed in its palm. It was going to erase her from existence. Adrian! Alara screamed. The entity paused. The black void covering Adrian's face rippled. For a second, a human eye, brown and terrified, surfaced in the darkness. "Run!" Adrian's voice, small and drowning, came from the entity. "Alara, run!" Silence. The Eidolon commanded, suppressing the human consciousness. The blackness surged back. Alara didn't run. She sheathed her sword. She stood up, wiping blood from her lip. She looked at the monster that was wearing her husband's face. "No," Alara said. She started walking toward him. "Alara, stop!" Mira shouted from the floor, clutching her throat. "That isn't him, it will kill you." Alara ignored her. She walked into the storm of psionic energy surrounding Adrian. The force of it tore at her clothes, cut her skin. It felt like walking into a tornado of razor blades. "You think you are strong," Alara shouted at the entity. "You are nothing but noise, you are having a tantrum." "I am extinction," the Eidolon roared. "You are my husband," Alara yelled back. She reached him. The energy burned her hands, but she grabbed Adrian's face. She didn't try to fight the Eidolon with strength. She fought it with connection. She bit her own lip, drawing blood. Then she kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of romance. It was a blood rite. She forced her blood, the blood of an ancient vampire queen, into his mouth. Blood bond. In the physical world, Alara's body went limp as she collapsed against him. In the mental world, she opened her eyes. She was standing in a vast frozen ocean. The sky was a static white noise. Black lightning struck the dark water. In the center of the ocean, a man was drowning. Adrian was chained to a massive anchor, sinking deeper into the cold black depths. Above the water, a titan loomed. It was a creature made of shadows and jagged lines, a caricature of a soldier screaming for violence. The Eidolon. Alara dove. She swam through the freezing water. It was thick with guilt. Every regret Adrian had ever felt, every life he had failed to save, was weighing him down. She reached him. He looked at her, his eyes dead. "Go away," he bubbled. "I can't hold it, I'm too weak." Alara grabbed his chains. She pulled. "You are right," she said, her voice clear in the water. "You are weak. You cry at sad movies. You trip over carpets. You are afraid of the dark." Adrian looked at her confused. "And I love you for it," Alara said. "Because you feel things, Adrian. That monster up there. It doesn't feel right. It just destroys. Your weakness is your humanity. It is your conscience. It is the only thing that makes you strong enough to hold this back." She put her hand on the heavy iron chain wrapped around his chest. "You don't have to fight it alone anymore," she whispered. "I am here. We are here." "It wants to kill," Adrian wept. "It wants to kill Kalar. It wants to kill them all." "Then let it go," Alara said fiercely. "Desire is not action. You choose. You always choose. That is your power, Adrian. Not the void. The choice." She kissed him in the dreamscape. The chains didn't break. They dissolved. Adrian gasped, inhaling the water, but realizing it wasn't water. It was air. It was light. He looked up at the looming shadow titan above the surface. "My turn," Adrian said. He grabbed Alara's hand and they shot upward, breaking the surface of the black ocean like a missile. In the throne room, the entity froze. Kalar had recovered. He was standing up, preparing to fire a disruptor cannon at the couple. "Die, abomination!" Kalar shouted. The blackness retracted from Adrian's skin. It sucked back into his pores. The void eyes faded, replaced by irises that were a burning molten gold. Adrian caught the disruptor blast with his bare hand. He didn't absorb it. He caught it. He held the energy ball, condensed it, and crushed it into sparks. He looked at Kalar. Adrian stood straight. He wasn't slouching. He wasn't joking. He was radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying calm. The Eidolon was still there. Alara could feel it buzzing under his skin, but it wasn't driving. It was the engine. Adrian was the pilot. You wanted the weapon, Adrian said. His voice was his own, but layered with the depth of the Eidolon. Here it is, Kalar screamed, and charged, drawing his void blade. Adrian didn't move his feet. He simply raised a finger. Sit. Gravity multiplied by 100. Kalar was slammed into the floor. The stone cracked. His armor buckled. He tried to rise, but Adrian walked forward each step, increasing the pressure. You called me weak, Adrian said, standing over the fallen lord. Because I chose not to use this. Because I chose to be a husband, a partner, a human. Adrian knelt down. He looked Kalar in the eye. It takes zero effort to destroy Kalar. Any bomb can do that. It takes infinite strength to hold back. Kill me! Kalar spat, blood bubbling on his lips. Finish it, prove me right. If you spare me, you remain a coward. Adrian reached out. He placed his hand on Kalar's chest. No, Adrian said softly. I'm not going to kill you. That's what the old Adrian would have done out of fear. That's what the Eidolon wants. Adrian's eyes flared gold. I am going to take your toys away, he pulsed. It wasn't a blast of force. It was a surgical strike of psionic energy. It bypassed Kalar's flesh and went straight to the nanites in his blood, the ancient technology that gave the vampire lords their extended abilities and connection to the fortress. Adrian fried them. Kalar convulsed. He arched his back, screaming as his connection to the fortress was severed. The strength drained out of his muscles. The eternal youth in his cells faltered. In seconds, he wasn't a demigod anymore. He was just an old, broken man lying on a cold floor. Adrian stood up. The gold faded from his eyes, returning to warm brown. He staggered slightly. Alara was there, instantly catching him. Did we win? Adrian asked, his voice slurring. Alara looked at Kalar, who was sobbing in the ruins of his armor, stripped of his power. She looked at Mira, who was sitting up, breathing painfully, but alive. Yes, Alara said, holding him tight. We won. Adrian looked at the ceiling. I think I'm going to take a nap now. And for the first time in 10 years, Adrian Cole slept without nightmares. 2 weeks later. The great hall of Nocturne Spire was different. The gloom was still there, it was still a planet of eternal night, but the atmosphere had shifted. The tension that had choked the court for months was gone, replaced by a nervous, respectful hush. The Alliance Treaty had been ratified that morning. The Human Confederacy and the Nocturne Dominion were officially united. Adrian stood on the balcony looking out over the city. He wore a new uniform. It wasn't the silk of a consort. It was a long coat of armored weave, dark blue and silver. On his shoulder was a new insignia, a shield crossed with a star. Warden, a voice called out. Adrian turned. Archivist Saren was approaching, holding a datapad. Warden Cole, Saren corrected himself. The Council has approved the proposal. The Dead Zone Fortress will be converted into a containment facility for dangerous xenotech. You have full jurisdiction. Thank you, Saren, Adrian said. And Kalar. He is in a standard cell, Saren said. He is aging rapidly. Without his augmentations, he has perhaps 20 years left. He spends his days writing manifestos that no one reads. Fitting, Adrian nodded. If I may, Saren hesitated. The Eidolon. Is it safe? Adrian tapped his temple. It's quiet. We came to an understanding. It gives me juice when I need it, and I promise not to use it to conquer the galaxy. It's a work in progress. Alara calls it marriage counseling for my brain. Saren blinked his large eyes, not understanding the joke, but bowed nonetheless and retreated. A moment later, the doors opened again. Queen Alara Nyx walked onto the balcony. She wasn't wearing her crown. She was holding 2 glasses of wine. She walked up to Adrian and handed him one. You look dashing, she said, eyeing his new uniform, though I miss the clumsy suits. I can still take a trip if you want, Adrian offered. I am very versatile. Alara smiled. She leaned against the railing next to him. The council is terrified of you, you know. They don't know what to do with a human who can flatten a dreadnought with his mind. Let them be terrified, Adrian said. Fear keeps them honest. As long as they respect you, I'm happy. They respect us, Alara corrected. She looked at him, her expression softening. You were right, Adrian. About power. I thought power was about control, about walls. But watching you spare Kalar, that was the strongest thing I have ever seen. Adrian took a sip of wine. I didn't do it alone. You pulled me out of the deep end, Alara. If you hadn't come into my head. I will always come for you, Alara promised. She set her glass down and turned to face him fully. She ran a hand down his arm, feeling the muscle beneath the coat. So, she murmured, a playful glint in her eyes. The Warden of the Vale, the Tamer of the Eidolon, the Savior of the Dominion. It's a mouthful, Adrian admitted. I prefer Adrian, Alara smirked. She leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. I heard a rumor today, she whispered. A new ambassador from the reptilian sector arrived. He saw you walking in the garden. Oh, Adrian raised an eyebrow. What did he say? He asked who the fragile human was. Adrian laughed. It was a genuine happy sound that rang out over the silent city. What did you tell him? Alara pulled back, looking him in the eyes with fierce pride and undeniable love. I told him, she said, that you are still weak, Adrian grinned. Ouch. Yes, Alara continued, suppressing a smile. You are weak against my bad cooking. You are weak against ticking clocks. And you are tragically weak when it comes to telling bad jokes. Guilty as charged, Adrian said. But Alara grabbed his lapels and pulled him down for a kiss. I also told him that if he ever calls you that again, I will let my husband explain the definition of weakness to him, personally. You are scary when you are protective, Adrian murmured against her lips. I learned from the best, Alara replied. She took his hand, interlacing her cold, pale fingers with his warm, scarred ones. They stood there silhouetted against the eternal night, watching the twin moons rise. They were different species, different worlds, different times. One was a creature of blood, the other, a vessel of the void. But as they stood together, watching the galaxy turn, neither of them felt weak. They felt infinite.